Their winter was our summer, and so many of the Southern Hemisphere countries have just been through a season where the new H1N1 strain did dominate. It caused most of the illness in a number of these places. There were some places where the healthcare capacity was really somewhat strained, but in most of the places it was a severe year, but not their worst ever. So that gave us a sense of what to expect.
Well, is that actually true? I mean, I assume their sanitation and healthcare opportunities are not quite what we might have in the Northern Hemisphere. Is that factored into your calculus when you're looking at what to extrapolate from the Southern Hemisphere?
You know, every community will be different. The comparisons I'm making are with places like Australia and New Zealand that are a little bit closer to our health system capacity. But importantly, even in some of those countries, there were hard-hit communities and there were hard-hit populations. We're concerned that in a couple places we've heard of indigenous populations having a higher morbidity and mortality. Aboriginal populations in Australia, in Manitoba, some of the Native Americans there. So I think that we need to be ready to be flexible and as prepared as possible. We may have this H1N1 on top of the regular seasonal strains. We may have sort of 2 seasons or almost 3, and so we're
to that
flexible.
point, I guess my next question would be, how do we gauge the flow as we get into the fall and winter flu season here in America? How we're doing compared to our normal in terms of the values, and will the CDC and others continue to be slightly alarmist, which may be viewed as your job, but as a small businessman, I'd like to get some pretty good, solid, accurate information as to how we're comparing with trends we've seen in the past.
Yes, we have enhanced our surveillance to have more timely information that's helpful to people, and also to get information that's more useful locally. We are already seeing increases in influenza, but it's only in some parts of the country, the southeastern states, but not the rest of the country in general. The state and local governments are going to try to share the information they have so that you'll know in your community what's going on. And I think we've learned a lot from the spring about interventions. We've learned that it was a new virus. We took it very seriously. We imposed some interventions to be on the safe side, and we've been able to take the knowledge of what the experience really was like to sort of temper those interventions to have a good balance between protecting health and safety and not in untowardly disrupting the economy.
I just would hope that as we go forward, we'd have accurate, timely, somewhat authoritative, as much as you can be with a disease, information to guide the small business community going forward. Ms. Blank, what are we doing to protect the agricultural industry from the misnomer about the flu and the porcine population being the big cause of this? What actions do you see the government or Department of Commerce or chambers or the farm organizations doing to make sure Americans get good information here?
Yeah, it is extremely unfortunate that this flu has gotten named with an animal name, which you know, by all accounts is not a very accurate title at all.
Let's keep emphasizing that, please.
Yeah, no, I understand. I have cousins who are pork farmers who are quite upset about this. Obviously, the government has tried very hard to use the right nomenclature here and continues to do that. I think that there's information, you know, on the CDC website, on the www.flu.gov website that emphasizes that this does not relate to eating any particular foods out there. That this is a flu that's transmissible in the way that other flus are, and that one should think of it in those terms. It is hard to counter a name once it gets out there, and I think we just have to all keep making sure we use the right language and we keep saying the right things and hope that that does get through.
Thank you. Yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Luetkemeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to follow up on a couple of Congressman Schrader's remarks and questions, just to kind of nail down the effect of the flu versus the bird flu. Dr. Shushat, can you give me just how many people were affected with the bird flu? And you said this is going to be less than the bird flu?
There are two principal differences between the avian flu, bird flu that we've been talking about for the past few years and the 2009 H1N1. One difference is that the bird flu strain, H5N1, was very lethal, about 2/3 of people who got that infection die from it. That's just extraordinarily lethal. And the H1N1 2009 strain is not of anywhere near that magnitude lethality. On the other hand, the H5N1 bird flu strain that we were talking about did not acquire the ability to spread easily person to person. Almost all of the cases that we have, it's several hundred cases that we've had since 2003, have been animal to human, bird to human. Very, very few, probably a couple, that were human to human. Whereas virtually everything that we're seeing with the 2009 H1N1 is extremely efficient person-to-person spread. So that bird flu strain, fortunately, has not become pandemic, but it's very, very severe. The H1N1 strain has become pandemic. It's very easily spread, person-to-person, spreading around the world. Fortunately, it doesn't have that severity or lethality that the bird flu strain had or that the 1918 strain had. That's really good news right now because we think we can manage this with prompt treatment of people who are at risk with antivirals, and that we're very close to having a vaccine to prevent and mitigate disease.
Okay.
But so the lethality and transmission are the two big differences there.
Okay. Mr. McGraw, with regards to Homeland Security, are you monitoring other countries where this is popping up? Obviously, some folks have testified here with regards to the southern part of the hemisphere, much more prevalent. Are you monitoring it? And if so, are you going to restrict travel between those countries if you see a problem with it being exported to our country?
Yeah, I can speak to the monitoring, and he could probably do the travel issues. We have been intensively monitoring the virus and the disease it causes around the world, including Southern Hemisphere countries. So far, the virus is the same. It hasn't mutated. It's the same as what we have and what we had last spring.
Could you name a couple of those countries just so we know?
Yes, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina, Chile. Those are countries where there's been a lot of information. Peru, I may be forgetting a few. So we actually have people and partnerships in a number of countries. And at flu.gov, we've released, the HHS has released a report on the Southern Hemisphere that describes, the assessment of what we saw there and how that can help us anticipate what we're going to have this fall, knowing that the health systems might be different.
The right question is, are you going to, if you see that it's a pandemic level there, are you going to restrict travel?
Yeah,
Is that an option?
There's not a plan for any travel restrictions. At this point, the U.S. has as much or more disease than anyone else does. We are strongly encouraging others not to restrict travel of Americans, and we are not intending to restrict travel elsewhere. We think it's so important for people who are sick to not travel and for people who are sick to stay home and not spread their illness, but we don't think that one country is a riskier place than another right now. Unfortunately, the virus is all over the world.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Blaine, very quickly, I'm running out of time here. Also want to follow up with regards to Congressman Schrader's remarks with regards to getting a better handle on the name of the flu. Are you working with the national media to see once if those folks would try and not use other words other than H1N1? Are you briefing those people, and are you keeping track of their lack of doing that?
I think CDC is involved with this quite closely.
All right.
Yeah, we've been working intensively with the media this summer to try to ready them to help with the fall outbreaks. We've had workshops and tabletops and so forth. We have discussed the name issue. I think their view is the name has stuck, and many of them are trying to use the H1N1 term that we're using consistently, but I don't think we'll be able to convince the headline writers.
Well, how do you think we ought to address that problem? Because I mean, it's significantly impacting the pork industry. So we need to, just to let them get away with it and say, well, they're doing their best. I mean, is that good enough?
Well, one thing that we are monitoring is understanding of the population. There have been several polls to try to understand, are people not eating pork, or are some of those factors happening? And we think we're actually winning with the American public's understanding. So I think that's probably going to be more helpful. But I do think it's very important to look at all the economic consequences.
Don't you think it'd be wise, though, that you have a meeting once a week, once a month with the national media folks and say, hey, in your articles following up on this disease, we noticed that a number of times that you were incorrectly using the name of the slang name for this flu.
It's an important point and one that we should continue to emphasize. So I'll make sure that our public affairs offices are are aware and do, continue to push. We are all coordinated in our use of the H1N1 moniker and away from other names. And so we'll continue to push on that. I
would the gentleman yield?
recognize your
Yes, I
point.
yield. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Dr. Schuchert, on this point of the name issue, for the record, is there a direct correlation between swine farms and the H1N1 pandemic?
No, this virus is spread